Told you guys a few days ago there was it's a process as far as selecting who the starting quarterback is. We have decided, or I have decided, that Jacoby Brissett will be our starting quarterback this season.
And there you have it. Patriots head coach Jerod Mayo naming Jacoby Brissett starting QB. How exciting. Welcome back to another episode of Boston Has Entered the Chat. He's Khalin Kapoor calling in from Georgia. I'm Natalie Noury coming to you from the PNC Bank studio here at Ness. And Khalin, this is my first time hosting a show with you. Very exciting. I know you just graduated college just a few months ago. How's everything going for you so far?
Natalie, it's going great. So happy to be here with you. Happy to be back. It's been a while since I've been here in Boston and entered the chat, and we got some big news to talk about, some storylines to break down. It's going to be fun. Let's get right into it.
Yeah, you got that right. A ton of headlines today. We're going to start with the Patriots and Jacoby Brissett being named as a starting QB. We'll have a nice little segment about some college football. We know that season is upon us, as well as some trending headlines too, some contract extensions. We're talking some of the best defensemen in the NHL right now. But let's get right into the headliner of the day. Also, don't forget that you can call in. You can share your thoughts, opinions, what have you. But you can call us at the hotline at 617-790-0928. Or you can email us at the chat at nesson.com. But like I mentioned, the headline of the day, Jacoby Brissett being named starting QB for the Patriots. Jerod Mayo addressed the media earlier, and here's what he had to say.
Yeah, good morning, friends. Just like I told you guys a few days ago, there was it's a process as far as selecting who the starting quarterback is. We have decided, or I have decided, that Jacoby Brissett will be our starting quarterback this season. Now, in saying that, as an organization, we're 100% behind Jacoby. There is no, you got a guy right here, you got a guy right there. We're 100% behind Jacoby. And I had an opportunity to talk to Drake. I had an opportunity to talk to Jacoby separately and also together. And I feel like we're all on the same page from an organizational perspective.
You said that you had the decision, and it was your decision. What ultimately led you to Jacoby Brissett?
Yeah, there are a lot of factors that led to this choice. I think the hard part is thinking in the short term and the long term at the same time. As an organization, though, we feel like Jacoby gives us our best chance to win right now.
Jacoby Brissett will be the starting quarterback this season. There's no possibility that Drake will be it.
I don't want to get into hypotheticals. We can't go into the season saying, well, he's going to go X amount of weeks. Like, look, as long as Jacoby's going out there performing the way that we all have confidence in him doing, he'll be our quarterback this season.
Well, there you go. Short and sweet, short press conference from Jerod Mayo, but a lot to unpack there. I don't think, in my perspective, however, Jacoby Brissett being named as the starting QB, it doesn't really surprise me, Khalin.
Absolutely not. And I think this one was kind of a no-brainer, no matter what happened. And the quarterback controversy, quote unquote, wasn't even a controversy until Drake Maye started balling out in the preseason. But, all things considered, all of that being said, Drake Maye is a rookie. He's a 21-year-old kid. He needs time to develop, especially considering the offensive line situation that New England has. The entire system, it's a new system with a new head coach that New England has. And Jacoby Brissett is a veteran. He has been around the block. He's been in New England before, and he's been able to win football games in bad situations before. I don't think this was even a question. As soon as Brissett, at least in my mind, as soon as Brissett was signed by the New England Patriots, he was going to be the starter for week 1 and beyond. Now, we can talk about those hypotheticals that Jerod Mayo doesn't want to talk about, which is, when will Drake Maye take the reins? Will it even be this season? Because I do think it will be this season at some point after, maybe it's 4 weeks, maybe it's 5 or 6 weeks. But all regardless, Jacoby Brissett is the guy to lead this team right now, because Drake Maye, I just don't think is ready just yet. The preseason stats were great. A 62% completion percentage is fantastic. No interceptions really makes you believe that he can take care of the football. But look, contextualizing against second or third stringers, they're not disguising coverages. They're not disguising rushes or schemes. They're running pretty basic sets on defense, are the Commanders and the Eagles in the preseason. So I really think Brissett is the most well-equipped right now to handle the first month of this season, the first 2 months of this season, and give Drake Maye the time to develop behind the scenes. If the coaches like what they see in practice, if they like what they see, with those second-string players in the practice realm, in the weeks leading up to the first second half of the season, the first month after the season starts, then we can have that conversation. At this point, like you said, Natalie, it's really a no-brainer that Brissett would be the starter, and I don't see him going anywhere barring, catastrophe, barring injury, barring a Nathan Peterman type 5 interception game in week 3 or week 4, then we might see Drake Maye. But at this point, I really don't think Drake Maye is going to be coming in at the very least for the first month of the season.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head right there. I think when they signed Jacoby Brissett, they knew that he was going to be starting week 1. I don't think they expected, and I'm going to echo your sentiment there, they didn't expect Drake Maye to ball out, I'll use your term, like he did. I think he came in and he competed maybe a little harder than anybody was really anticipating. I mean, he's shown what he got. He can definitely make some explosive plays. He can drive an offense, but he's 21. He hasn't done this yet. He hasn't had a full NFL season under his belt. And not to mention this offensive line, it's not in any kind of shape or form to have a number 3 overall, 21-year-old quarterback behind them. I just don't think they're in the position right now to put their rookie out there and risk possible more damaging situations than what would happen if they just put a veteran like Jacoby Brissett in there. And Jerod Mayo said that he spoke to them both. He said, I had an opportunity to talk to Drake. I had an opportunity to talk to Jacoby separately and also together. And I feel like we are all on the same page from an organizational perspective. Do you think the way that he handled it by talking to the team first and then confirming it to the media, even though we kind of already knew under speculation, do you think he handled this right? And do you agree with his decision to do all this?
Yeah, I think he handled it right on the fact that he talked to the quarterbacks beforehand. I think the way that he interacted with the media is a little bit interesting, saying Drake Maye is 100% our second best quarterback. Now, what he's saying behind the scenes could be a little bit different than what he's saying to the media. So obviously we can't speculate on that right now. But from what I understand from all of the reporting out of New England Patriots camp is that Drake Maye is committed to being, at this point, the backup quarterback and to developing and to getting better. And in his words, helping out Jacoby as much as possible. And that is the exact type of professionalism that you want to see from a rookie quarterback. It's not like he's going in there with a chip on his shoulder saying, I'm better than this guy. It should be me. And it's the team's fault that they're not picking me. He identifies that there are things in his game that he needs to work on. But you're absolutely right that he was really, really strong in the preseason. He showed the athleticism. He showed bursts and flashes of things that New England Patriots fans haven't seen in a really, really long time. The way that he, establishes himself in the pocket and is able to move around in the pocket and be deceptive and improvise in the pocket is not something that the Patriots have had in their signal caller in a really long time. And it's the level of excitement that I see on social media about Drake Maye is really, really cool to see. I do think there is a little bit of vitriol that I've seen on the X's and the Instagrams of the world that are saying Jerod Mayo is making the absolutely incorrect decision. We all saw what Drake Maye could do. Let's throw him into the fire. But I think it's really time to pump the brakes on that mentality because, like I said, these aren't the most, really, really obscure systems in the world. He's really facing the bare bones in the NFL when you're talking about preseason. And when I see things like that, it always makes me think of that Sam Darnold clip when he's playing against the Patriots and he's saying that he's seeing ghosts. And in that context, those ghosts are, phantom rushers off the edge that he thinks are going to be there but aren't there, or phantom DBs and disguised coverages. That's the kind of thing you don't see in preseason. And so when you see it in real game action, especially if it's against a defensive master like Bill Belichick, it can really shake and rattle the confidence of a young quarterback. So I think it's really, really smart that Jerod Mayo is not throwing his rookie quarterback to the Wolves, especially against a solid defense like Cincinnati in week 1. You extrapolate it to the entire first half of the season. I don't want to see Drake Maye play against San Francisco on the road in week 4. I don't think that would be good or positive for his development at this point in his career.
Yeah, you look at those first 4 weeks, Khalin, and you've got, oh gosh. So you're starting with Cincinnati. You have Seattle next. You go to the New York Jets, and then you've got the 49ers. I mean, in my opinion, I am not going to see Drake Maye in there, at least for the first month of football. I think what you mentioned about just his confidence, too, it's like you don't want to put him out there, have him make a few mistakes, the O-line not hold up, and then he just gets demolished, and then, boom, his confidence is gone. He got thrown to the Wolves, and he didn't come back, from that situation. So you just don't want to see something like that happen. Not for a kid who's 21, not for a kid who knows there's a ton of pressure on him, too, to kind of help rebuild this program, this team. But I just think, like, at the end of the day, too, Jerod Mayo said, It's my decision. And I think, he said that. He said, we have decided, or I have decided, that Jacoby Brissett will be our starting quarterback this season. So he reminds us that, hey, it's ultimately up to me. It's a collaborative decision, but it's my decision. And I think he made the right decision. He had to be careful, too, because he's in a new position. This is a first year for him, so he wants to navigate this correctly as well, and he wants to make sure that he's putting everybody in the right position to succeed. Something that really stood out to me in the press conference, and I'll pull out another quote here. He said there were a lot of factors that led to this choice. I think the hard part is thinking of the short term and the long term at the same time, and I think that's where we should pay attention. He said, as an organization, that we feel like Jacoby will give us our best chance to win right now. And he has said this kind of twice, I feel like, in the past 48 hours. He's like, we want to win games now, but we want this to be a good long-term situation for us as well. So when he's talking about winning, I think he's kind of redefining the definition of win right here, because it's not like win games. Yes, you want to win games, but we also want to have internal organizational wins for the team to make sure that we can win in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really cerebral of a head coach to, one, identify that in a media press conference with the media, with the public at large, and say, hey, we know and we understand what Drake Maye can provide, but overall, holistically, what Jacoby Brissett's going to do is a lot greater. And I think it's true because we've seen what Brissett has been like throughout his entire career, not just a steady quarterback that can manage a game, manage a drive, especially with a good running back like Ramondre Stevenson, and what we expect to be, at the very least, a decent defense that can win you a couple of football games. But also, take it back just last year with Jacoby Brissett and another young quarterback in Sam Howell. All of the reporting in Washington was that Brissett was the mentor figure that he needed to be. And yes, Sam Howell didn't necessarily work out in Washington, but Brissett's the kind of guy that's going to do all he can to help out a young quarterback. It's not like Ryan Tannehill and Malik Willis, with Tannehill saying it's not my job to be a mentor. Jacoby Brissett is on the complete opposite side of that spectrum, and that he seems to be dedicating himself to, one, the team, but two, to Drake Maye. And I think that's really great. That's why I was so excited when Jacoby Brissett was signed, because I think he's a really good, experienced veteran that can instill a lot of lessons and a lot of best practices for a player like Drake Maye. One more thing, Natalie, just about the schedule. You mentioned that first 4 weeks, 3 of those are on the road. You mentioned going into New York, going into San Francisco, starting the season on the road in Cincinnati. These are environments that are going to be incredibly hostile, and you throw a rookie quarterback in there, there's no telling what's going to happen. So it is the right decision. I think, the people that are saying, it should be Drake Maye, Mayo doesn't know what he's talking about. They're really looking at it in that immediate short term, in that Drake Maye might give us a chance to win 2 or 3 extra games this season. I personally don't even think that's the case at this point. Maybe when we get to the second half, it could be the case. But I really think they're not seeing the forest through the trees, those people that are saying, that it should be Drake Maye initially, because I think this could pay the dividends that really mean Drake Maye can enter in, either if it's year 2 or if it's the second half here in year 1, and be a well-rounded, poised starting quarterback that doesn't need to be afraid of any kind of disguise scheme or afraid of anything that a defensive coordinator throws at him, because he'll have that experience to get through that.
And to think about where he came from with North Carolina, he didn't really have a super supportive offense there. And to know where the Patriots are at with their offensive line right now, too, it's like, right. Again, just to say, we don't want to put him out there with this going on. Not only, in my mind, too, you think about a situation like that and you're like, okay, did he have to overcompensate as the QB? Did he have to develop these habits to kind of coincide with the way that they were running their offense? But that aside, the NFL is it's a different beast. It's a different playing field. Whether or not he has, experience coming from that kind of situation and coming into another one just like that, I don't think it matters, because they need to make sure that he's as ready, as prepared as he can be to go out there and do what he does best. But he needs to have people around him to support him and help him succeed in that role. So talking about timeline of things, even Jerod Mayo was alluding to the fact that if Jacoby's out there and he's doing his thing and we can trust him to compete the way that we know he can, he's going to be our QB for the season. And he said that today. He said that with conviction. I think it kind of comes down to, again, how practice goes. How do we define how ready Drake Maye might be to take those steps? I think the first step to determining that is figuring out the offensive line.
Absolutely. And the first thing I think of when it's a rookie quarterback being thrown into a negative subpar situation is the dichotomy last season between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. Bryce Young was put into a situation that had all negatives. The offensive line was abysmal. There were no weapons on the outside. The first, 12 weeks of the season, there was basically no running game. And what happened to the Panthers? What happened to Bryce Young? We'll see if, Young can find something this season with a little bit more of a built offensive line and system around him. But then you contrast that to CJ Stroud, who was put into a situation with two solid weapons, a fantastic offensive line, and a decent running game. And that's what happens when a team builds around their rookie quarterback and when a team doesn't. And we don't have to get into all of the organizational flaws of Carolina right now. That could be a whole nother episode of the show. But for New England, and I think it's very, very smart that Jerod Mayo said for the season, because he's speaking with conviction and he's saying this is what our plan is now. Even the best laid plans sometimes fall into ruin. If the Patriots start, the first 4 weeks 0-4, if it goes the first half of the season, they have 1 or 2 wins, and Drake Maye is really showing up in practice behind the scenes. If he's, breaking down film and being able to understand what he needs to understand, then a change could occur. I would not be surprised if that is the case. But right now, Jerod Mayo is laying down his plan, and he wants it to be known by all. He wants it to be known, especially by his quarterback. So there's no controversy behind the scenes. So Drake Maye's not like, oh, you promised me this and you're delivering that. Everyone knows what the plan is here, and that it's for Jacoby Brissett to start the season. And if things don't go according to that plan, if the Patriots don't win a lot of games or they don't win the amount of games they expect to, that's when we start to have another conversation. But at this point, I really don't see a problem with what Jerod Mayo said in his press conference. I think a brutally honest head coach sometimes to the media especially is something that we can't really be mad at, especially here in New England after Bill Belichick. So I think it's all good stuff, and we'll see what happens here in week 1. I'm excited to what this new scheme's going to be, new OC, new head coach. It's going to be a fun game and a fun stretch of games for New England to start.
It sure will be. And if you want to hear more about the Patriots' decision behind naming Jacoby Brissett as the QB, don't be afraid to check out the newest episode of Foxborough Rush, where NESN.com writers Sean McGuire and Keegan Stiefel break down and examine how head coach Jerod Mayo handled the QB competition and what led to their decision to start Jacoby Brissett. Keegan and Sean also predict their studs and their duds for the Patriots this season. So make sure to listen or watch Foxborough Rush. You can find that on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, or wherever else you get your podcasts. And speaking of football, George Balekji caught up with Ben Stevens, host of College Football Today on SportsGrid TV, to fill you in on everything you need to know for the college football season. Check it out.
He's Ben Stevens, host of College Football Today, airing every Saturday on SportsGrid TV. And we're here to talk the 2024 college football season. Ben, thanks for joining, man. How you doing?
Georgie, it is always a pleasure to be with you. It is a new college football era in 2024. So many sweeping changes to the national landscape that we will discuss today for sure.
Yeah, we already have week 0 under our belts. We saw one upset already go down. Florida State, man, 13-1, starts 0-1 the following year. But let's get into it. You say the sweeping changes. Let's start with the college football playoff. Let's just start there. Expanding to 12 teams. What effect will this have on the landscape of college football across the country?
George, so many changes. It's the longest college football season we have ever seen, going all the way until January 20th, 2025. It will also be the largest field we have ever seen, competing for a true opportunity to win a national championship. The BCS era, long gone. The 4-team format and the 10-year history that it had in the college football playoff is a thing of yesteryear as well, which makes it incredibly interesting to see how the entire season is going to play out. In that decade-long 4-team format in the college football playoff, George, we never, not once, did we see a team with multiple losses make it into the field of 4. Now that we have 12, with the 5 highest-ranked conference champs earning an automatic bid and 7 at-large bids on the line as well, we are going to see multiple teams with multiple losses into the college football playoff, which I enjoy. Some have argued that it makes the regular season a little bit more insignificant. I would argue the opposite. You referenced Florida State, the preseason number 10 team in the country. In years past, Florida State would have a very slim to none margin of making it to the college football playoff, with Slim walking out the door. Now FSU still has a season to fight for. It will make every game, every week, throughout the entirety of 2024 compelling, intriguing, and important. I'm a big fan of expansion in the CFP.
I'm the same way. Multiple loss teams. We'll see underdogs. We'll see upsets. We're just going to see more bowl games, and I'm all for that. The longer the bowl season. And like you said, the 5 highest ranking conference champions. So we'll have the Power 4, then whoever wins, the Mountain West, the AAC, and all that. And then the 7 highest ranked teams remaining. I just love the madness it'll bring in. So we used to have the Power 5. It's now the Power 4. OU in Texas and the SEC is one. Cal and Stanford in the ACC. Wrap your mind around that Atlantic Coastal Conference. Arizona State in the Big 12, and then UCLA, USC, and our beloved Big 10. Ben, like how I did that one. Out of these newbies, who do you give the best shot to win their conference?
George, I would check in on 2 places. That would be first in the Big 10. I think Oregon rivals Ohio State for that best team, for that preseason favorite, entering the Big 10 title race before a season even begins. Oregon, great defensively last year. We know what the offensive firepower that Eugene can hold. And now it's a new quarterback in Dillon Gabriel, but with the same offensive coordinator in Will Stein, who got the most out of Bo Nix this season ago. And I would expect similar productive numbers for Dillon Gabriel and the Ducks in 2024. And a lot of defensive improvements and some transfer portal additions that Dan Lanning made. Oregon as complete, balanced, deep, and talented, as you will see, not just in the Big 10, but around the nation in college football. So I'd give Oregon a look in the Big 10. And in the Big 12, Utah is a staple of consistency. It is about to be year number 20 under Kyle Whittingham. And in 2 of the last 3 years to end out their tenure in the Pac-12, both 2021 and 2022, the Utes were a conference champion. They enter their first season in the Big 12 as the preseason favorites, both from the odds perspective and the media poll pick to win the Big 12 in 2024. And if we could all go to college for 7 years, who would pass up the opportunity? That's what Cam Rising is doing. Utah's returning quarterback injured late in 2022 in the Rose Bowl defeat to Penn State, missed all of 2023, despite many thinking he would be back at some point in Salt Lake. He returns for year 7 in college football. Steady, veteran presence with a ton of experience, ready to guide Utah to immediate success in the Big 12.
Yeah, Oregon 2-1 to win the Big 10. Utah plus 280 to win the Big 12. And you're right on that. If I'm Cam Rising, all this NIL money I can make now, all this college football to let me play, I'll make more money now in the NIL than I ever will in the NFL because some guys are college athletes and they're just not pro athletes. I love to point out on Oregon, you get Dillon Gabriel to replace Bo Nix, another experienced quarterback, another dual threat like Nix. And then you also go into the portal, as Dan Lanning did, and get Evan Stewart, the wide receiver out of Texas A&M. Middle, deep down the center of the field where Gabriel loves to throw, goes in, gets that to revamp their wide receiver room as well. I got to throw it out here. I got to ask about it. I mean, everyone wants to know. And the target gets bigger, and, the narrative is flipping of people supporting Deion in Colorado to everyone waiting to see him fall. But do you see an actual step forward from a team that went 4-8, and we know how high the mountaintop was and how low rock bottom was, but to actually take a step forward of, could this be a Colorado team that, with all the hype they're built around, and they do have talent on that side, could be in the college football playoff picture?
No, not at all in terms of college football playoff contention, but that's where I think the unfair assessment comes for the Buffaloes. A Colorado team that has a win total entering year 2 of the prime era in Boulder of 5.5. If Colorado goes over that number, that would be great success for a CU program that has only reached bowl eligibility once in the last decade, right? And for a 4-8 team in the first year of Deion's time at CU, for a team that won just a single game at the FBS level in 2022 before Deion Sanders arrived at the helm of the Buffs, wouldn't that be year-over-year improvement? A 1-win football team, a 4-8 football team in the first year of Deion Sanders' tenure to a 6-6 bowl-eligible football team? That, to me, would be success. But Deion Sanders, because of the attention that he welcomes in Boulder, will that be the standard that they are judged by? I would say no. If they are just a 6-win football team, I think many people will look at Colorado and consider the season a failure. I do not. Shedeur Sanders is one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 and maybe around college football this year in 2024. Travis Hunter, of course, one of the most dynamic playmakers and the best two-way player you will see in college football this year. He will be tasked with doing everything if he can remain healthy. The biggest keys for CU, George, not from a national notoriety perspective, but just a football X's and O's, is protecting Shedeur Sanders. They gave up the second most sacks in all of FBS college football a season ago. They went to the transfer portal to try to fill a couple of those holes. They got a 5-star recruit in Jordan Seaton, who will be expected to anchor the offensive line right away. Will it be enough with how Deion Sanders has built his program? Not for a college football playoff run, in my estimation, but for 6 wins and bowl eligibility, maybe so.
Yeah, that's what you said it. With the attention that comes with Deion Sanders, like year over year, the fact that Colorado won 4 games and beat TCU and just was winning games within playing equal level of competition, that's a huge upgrade. Yeah. But when they're going to look back, and we're going to see a Travis Hunter possibly go top 3, top 5 in this draft, we'll see Shedeur Sanders, who I think is capable of being an NFL quarterback, and I wouldn't mind him being in to take in the first round. But everything that comes with it, it's the off the field, the pressure that comes in, where 6 wins would be a parade for Colorado at any point in their history of their program since they fell off, after the 90s in their reign there. But what Deion Sanders brings, what Shedeur Sanders brings, what Travis Hunter and those guys bring, it's a different story for them. We've talked about the big names. We mentioned Dillon Gabriel. We look at the Heisman landscape coming up. Who do you think hoists the best trophy to me in all of college sports?
George, we talked about expansion in the college football playoff. One of the things that I will be monitoring throughout all of 2024 is the sample size it will set for the Heisman Trophy race. As we use the 10-year history of the 4-team format in the CFP, 7 of the 10 Heisman Trophy winners either led their team to a conference championship or a college football playoff appearance. Neither of the past 2 in Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels, but there was a strong track record prior to that. 8 of the 10 play the quarterback position. Of course, the Heisman Trophy has been dominated by the quarterback position in the last 20 to 25 years. So if we have in the college football playoff expanded world more teams in the national conversation late into November, does that do the same thing for the individual race that is the Heisman Trophy? 2 names to keep an eye on. At 14-1, it's Jackson Dart, the quarterback for Ole Miss. Ole Miss is favored to reach the college football playoff, George, in this first year of a field of 12. And in a Lane Kiffin offense, the numbers are always going to be there. If Dart can lead the running Rebs to college football playoff consideration, keep an eye on his number. And then a little bit deeper down the board, although I wish the number was longer than it is, 25-1 on Avery Johnson, the second-year quarterback, the true sophomore for Kansas State. First, the numbers. 5 passing touchdowns for K-State during his true freshman season, only made 8 appearances, often in garbage time once K-State was either winning by a ton or the other way around. Had 7 rushing scores, though, more on the ground than he did even with his arm. And, George, we saw that personified in the biggest bowl game of last season, in my estimation. That was the Pop-Tarts Bowl, a bowl that swept the nation from that conversation standpoint. And Avery Johnson, making his first career start for the Wildcats, put on a show. Multiple passing touchdowns, more than 70 yards on the ground, and a score there as well. He won Pop-Tarts Bowl MVP, so I am starting a theory and a narrative entering 2024. In the history of college football, we have never seen a Pop-Tarts Bowl MVP with that prestigious hardware and fail to win the Heisman Trophy the following season. Don't tell anybody it was the inaugural Pop-Tarts Bowl in 2023. We're going to continue the theory into 2024, but keep an eye on Avery Johnson and Kansas State, who can rival Utah for that top spot in the Big 12.
Yeah, I've heard that, and this makes sense. I was talking with very high-level people in charge of conferences and presidents of universities. They've been saying they're looking for that back-to-back trophy happen. Pop-Tarts Bowl winner, yep. Heisman Trophy winner. But many are searching for who will be the first Triple Crown winner of Duke's Mayo Bowl champion, Pop-Tart Bowl champion and MVP, and then a Heisman winner. But this is what the expanded playoff can bring this. I love it. And we talk about 12 teams. We talk about these Heisman guys. It still looks like there's 4 teams. Georgia, OSU, with Will Howard and Chip Kelly now there. Chip Kelly, the offensive coordinator. Will Howard come from Kansas State. Oregon and Texas, the 4 favorites to win the national championship. It could be one of those 4, and I wouldn't hate to pick, but who do you see hoisting the national championship with Jim Harbaugh, now gone to the NFL, but those 4 schools being the favorites to win it?
Because of Jim Harbaugh's final year in college football, and the Michigan Wolverines winning a national championship in 2023. Ohio State saw their most bitter rival stand atop the mountaintop in college football and said, never again over my dead body. They invested into the transfer portal. They brought everybody back. Chip Kelly is now the offensive coordinator. Ohio State, Georgia, is going to win a national championship in 2024. In fact, I think at bare minimum, it is a national championship game appearance or bust for the Buckeyes in Columbus. If they fail to do that, although I might not agree with the ultimate decision, there will be some calls for Ryan Day's job about elevating the ceiling in Columbus. But I do ultimately believe that Ohio State will reach that precipice and win a national championship in 2024.
Man, I love that pick. I mean, they get Will Howard, which I've read when they were at practice. He has been clocked as actually the quarterback, Will Howard, the fastest guy on the field. You get him with the Chip Kelly that only has to worry about running an offense and not a program. That's a scary tandem. That is the interesting part. I just want to follow up on that. Because there is the devil you know, the devil you don't. And if Ryan Day doesn't get the natty and they fire him, like who could come in and do the level of the job that he has, always with Ohio State finishing in the top 5, in the top 10, and of course, always being in the national conversation as a powerhouse.
Yeah, George, that's the key, right? 56-8 is Ryan Day's coaching record in Columbus. All 8 losses to ranked opponents, including the Cotton Bowl last year against Missouri. But more than 8, it's 3. It's 3 consecutive losses to Michigan, which has seen the Maize and Blue win a Big Ten championship and a national title, of course, in 2023. First step for Ohio State, get past Michigan this year, compete for a Big Ten title, reach the college football playoff, and then national championship beyond. Again, I don't think Ohio State, if they fail to reach the college football playoff semifinal, but they do beat Michigan, would actually question Ryan Day's job security. But there are some that have questioned it despite the overwhelming amount of success that Ryan Day has had in his relatively short tenure at Ohio State. Again, I do believe the Buckeyes will be there. Will Howard, along with Quinshon Judkins, the transfer from Ole Miss, Travion Henderson remains in the backfield. If you remember, George, the day of the late 2000s, maybe early 2010s, Chip Kelly, Oregon, with Dennis Dixon and Jonathan Stewart, when they would just run like crazy, that's what Ohio State is in for this year. And, oh, by the way, they might have the best wide receiver room in the country with Emeka Egbuka returning, with Carnell Tate back, and potentially the most talented offensive freshman in the country in Jeremiah Smith. And, the defense was the best part of the Buckeyes a year ago, the second best scoring defense nationally, and they bring back everybody. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau up front for this Buckeyes team. Tyleek Smith as well. You have a great linebacking core, and Caleb Downs, the SEC Freshman of the Year at the safety spot from Alabama, transfers to Columbus. Denzel Burke, maybe the best corner in college football, back for Ohio State as well. It is a plethora of riches to take advantage of this year in Columbus. I believe Ohio State answers the call.
Yeah, I love how you set that up. I mean, people forget how bad the quarterback play was in Ohio State. And they had Marvin Harrison Jr., who is a prolific prospect now in the NFL, of course. And that defense literally taking Michigan, the national champions, down to the last drive of that game. And when Michigan won that, you felt like that was a national championship decider. Finally, last one we got to ask. I mean, Nick Saban's now retired. That leaves Dabo Swinney, Kirby Smart, Mac Brown, the only active coaches in college football that have won a national championship. But I want to ask about Khalin DeBoer and Alabama. He's done it at every stop he's done, won instantly. And we saw what he built up Washington to be with all that NFL talent. What do you think the expectations are and what the ceiling is of Alabama with Khalin DeBoer now in year 1 as a head coach?
Listen, things are going to be different in Tuscaloosa this year. It is the standard that was set over 17 seasons under Nick Saban. I would preach some patience to Alabama fans, but not if Khalin DeBoer goes 7-5 and 8-4. But there is a chance, George, that Alabama could be a 9-3 football team and still earn an at-large berth to the college football playoff, or maybe even still contend in the gauntlet that is the SEC now with the additions of Oklahoma and Texas. All of that to say, it's probably not going to be an 11-1, 12-0 perfect season like it was often under Nick Saban, but that's not just because of Nick's departure and Khalin DeBoer's entrance, but the landscape of the SEC and college football. I expect the Crimson Tide to be in the college football playoff. The defense returns some talent, has to figure some things out up front. But if you need to know what Jalen Milroe is going to do under Khalin DeBoer, I ask you to watch what he has done at every stop at the FBS level. Michael Penix Jr., first at Indiana in Bloomington, and then, of course, last 2 seasons in Seattle with Washington. Jake Haener has a role in the National Football League because of what he was able to accomplish under DeBoer at Fresno State. I do believe Alabama is a 10-win football team this upcoming season. And although Nick Saban is no longer there, George, I do believe the Crimson Tide will be back into the college football playoff in year number 1 under Kalen DeBoer.
I love that. I mean, it is Bama. We've seen him do it at every stop. And I love you bring up his tenure at Indiana because, Ben, that takes me back to the good old days, brother. You and me on a podcast, me and Madison, you in New York City, putting the Big Ten on our shoulders and also starting that narrative of Michael Penix for Heisman. Injuries took it away from us, but I will never forget the good old days like that.
Always lives there, my friend. Always lives in our heart. We'll talk about Michael Penix Jr. for Comeback Player of the Year in the National Football League in just a couple of years after what Atlanta has done to him. That will be our next campaign.
I love that. Yes, forcing him to the bench, but coming off the bench while Penix has begun. He's Ben Stevens, host of College Football Today, every Saturday on SportsGrid TV. He's also Big Ten Ben, if you don't know. But trust me, follow him on Twitter, X, and you will find that out. Ben, thanks so much for taking the time, man.
George, appreciate you having me, man. It's going to be a great college football season.
Great stuff there from George Balekji and Ben Stevens. I love this time of year. We got college football coming back. We've got hockey just around the corner. You know, it's just a fun time of year. The weather's starting to get a little nicer, but something that really stands out to me about this, and this is where I want to dive in first, is just how the playoff field is expanding from 12 teams from 4. And this is the first time that they've done this in I think like a decade, which is crazy. But this is going to take the college football season into January of 2025, just what Ben Stevens said right there. And I think this is great. More football, more college football. I know that this has been in the conversation for the NFL as well, just about adding a game. We're doing that slow process. But what do you think about that expansion right there, Khalin?
I think it's really interesting. Obviously, there's going to be the purists, and Ben Stevens mentioned this as well. It's not just going to be the undefeated teams in these playoffs, but at the end of the day, it's going to whittle down to the best of the best regardless when you get to the semifinal and final rounds. This is something that the NCAA with at-large bids, I come from a college hockey background. That's what they do in D1 college hockey as well. And it allows for those Cinderella stories, those underdogs to really take shape. You think about some of the teams that in the lower echelon, potentially not those 4 power conferences that are going to make the playoffs. And then it's those 7 at-large bids as well. I personally think it's really cool to see some of these teams come in that you wouldn't even expect to be in the playoffs in years past. And, you know, more football is always exciting. There's going to be a lot more intrigue to me specifically throughout the regular season of, is this team that maybe lost a game here and a game there, could they still be built for college football national championship? I think that's why it's going to be really exciting. There's a lot of storylines. I mean, we can even take it close to home. What's Bill O'Brien going to do with the Boston College Eagles? I'm looking forward to that. It's obviously not necessarily a huge national storyline, but for us here in Boston, as I entered the chat, I think that's going to be very intriguing what the Eagles can do. Can they be relevant again in this college football landscape? There's so much to be excited about. That's the beauty of college football. No matter what team you support, if it's just a player, if it's a team, if it's a program, whatever, there's going to be something exciting that happens throughout this season.
Now, I have to tell you, I went down to Tuscaloosa a few years ago, not for a game day, for a game that was being played at home, but I went to a restaurant, and I didn't realize that even when Alabama is on the road, the city of Tuscaloosa still transforms into this like crazy, just like fan place. And it's crazy because we're from New England. I come from a college hockey background myself, and I've just never seen anything like this before. So the environment that surrounds these teams, the excitement, I bet you it's only going to get better from here. And, you know, we'd love to hear from everyone else that's watching. Boston has entered the chat. If you have any opinions on this, anything you'd like to see or hear more of, don't be afraid to call us at our hotline. That's 617-790-0928, or email us at the chat@nesson.com. We can talk way more about college football, and we will get into it as the season starts to pick up here. But want to get into some trending headlines now, and we can start with some more football here. I'm going to bring in my guy Aaron Rodgers. Now, what's happening right now? An NFL agent says the Jets are in complete disarray, that Aaron Rodgers isn't a team player. I don't know about that, but anyways, they said he skipped minicamp. And I don't know. First initial reactions, you can't skip minicamp after being off all last season from an Achilles injury, tearing it first game. I don't know. This is kind of a funny headline to me.
Yeah, I was jumping the gun just a second ago because it's just here we go again, right? This has always been the case for Aaron Rodgers, especially in these two seasons with New York. Now, I'm a little bit skeptical about this report. It's an anonymous agent, a one-sentence blurb in an article that was this agent's reaction or this agent's thoughts on every single NFL team. So I'm a little bit skeptical on this report. But the thing about it is that this is not something new. When you talk about the New York Jets, there was an entire expose published, I think it was earlier this summer, about everything that went wrong in New York because of Aaron Rodgers' injury. So it's not too far of a step to say that Aaron Rodgers is really the guy that's calling the shots. And I think the key important thing, I'm not going to belabor this point too much, but there are a lot of jobs that hinge on the performance of Aaron Rodgers this season, not the least of which is Jets head coach Robert Saleh. If Aaron Rodgers isn't good, if Aaron Rodgers gets injured again, that's it for Saleh in New York. I believe that very, very thoroughly because at the end of the day, he hasn't been able to bring victories to the New York Jets. So I'm not necessarily surprised that this is coming out. I don't think it really matters as long as Rodgers stays healthy and stays competitive this season.
Yeah, great approach there. It's good to be skeptical about this, but I think when you look at his career as a whole too, he's got one Super Bowl. I think he's 1 for 4 and championships, NFC championship games. But to skip minicamp and to come off a season where you tore your Achilles, you missed the whole year, and now you're skipping an important time of year. For me, I would feel like, hey, is my QB bought in? Like, I don't know if that brings great vibes to the locker room there. I'm not sure. We know that he's very talented. He can certainly throw a football. He can do things that the majority of us cannot. But he's got to be a little bit of a team player right now, especially getting back to the game after last season. I think he's got to find a way to show up now. But switching gears to Steph Curry, he just signed a 1-year extension to his already 4-year contract that he has 2 years remaining on. He signed this for $62.6 million through the season of 2026-27. Now, again, he has 2 years remaining on that 4-year deal at $215.4 million a year, and this is just one more on top of it. I think he's deserving.
Yeah, Natalie, my first thought of this was, man, I should have practiced my three-point shooting a little bit more when I was younger. I think I got into the wrong line of work. $60+ million for 1 year is insane, but it's deserved for what Steph Curry, the loyalty, the faith that he's had in the Golden State organization, his performance in the Olympics as well. All of this is very well deserved. What he's been able to accomplish in his NBA career. All signs point to him finishing that career with the Golden State Warriors. Like I said, it's well deserved. It's a laughable number just because of the sheer volume of money in a 1-year contract, especially because you don't usually see the 1-year gigantic number of contracts. But still great to see for Steph. He deserves the money. He deserves that payday.
I'm in the wrong line of work too. Certainly I can't do what either of you would do, but just a little quick math for you. And I'm lying. It's not that quick. I did it on my calculator. He's already making $53.8 million a year from that 4-year deal. So he is making almost $10 million additional with this extra year. He's going to be 39 by the time 2026-27 rolls around. But just to think about what this is going to do for ticket sales, for TV deals, people are going to tune in, travel to watch Steph Curry. I think this is all around a beneficial thing, not only for him, but for the team. And to continue to have a man like Steph Curry on your team, the face of the team, per se, I think this is great for them. And he is going to turn into a legend just by doing this, because we've seen people like LeBron switching teams or whatever, but I think this is great for the organization. Now, a topic I know you and I like very much, hockey. The NHL Network ranks Charlie McAvoy the 8th best defenseman in the league right now. I can say yes, I like him in this spot, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's the right spot for McAvoy. I think the key thing about it is that there's still room for him to get better and to improve and to be a top 3, top 2 guy in the NHL. I don't think he's going to be Cale Makar. I don't think necessarily he can be Quinn Hughes. But I think for Charlie McAvoy, this ranking is good. He dropped down 1 spot, I believe, from 2023's list by the NHL. But I think with a good season here in Boston, if he can really take another step forward on offense in creation, because the back checking and the defensive ability is there, we're going to see Charlie McAvoy be a top 5 defender in the NHL. So I like the spot here, and I like that there's room to grow.
And we are excited for the hockey season to get started. But he is Khalin Kapoor. I am Natalie Noury. This is another episode of Boston Has Entered the Chat. We are so glad that you could join us. Make sure to check us out, whether that's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for tuning in.